Dear Taurus, there is a subtle tremor approaching the fortress of peace you have so painstakingly built, and what is about to unfold will awaken the solid parts of your soul you thought had turned to stone forever. This is not a tangible guest, but the call of truth itself, appearing not to shatter your stability, but to gently invite you back to the core foundation you have been quietly seeking for so long. You see, I have felt this energy forming around the souls of Taurus, and I need you to understand that something profoundly deep is shifting within your inner world. The presence I sense is not here to take anything away. Instead, it arrives like a skilled artisan, carrying keys to unlock the rooms in your heart you sealed long ago, thinking they would never need to be opened again. How many times, in the quiet of your daily life, has a memory suddenly surfaced? Not a hazy dream, but a tangible feeling, a familiar scent, an old song on the radio, a sense of security you haven't felt in years. You've created a beautiful and solid rhythm for your life, haven't you? Everything on the surface is in order. Memories are neatly tucked away like precious heirlooms. Emotions are kept under tight control, and your heart is protected behind firm declarations like, "That's in the past." But you and I both know, dear Taurus, that for souls as deep and steadfast as yours, nothing ever truly disappears. It simply settles, sinking deep into the soil of your soul, becoming a vibration that only your instincts can feel. A familiarity so profound, your heart recognizes it before your mind can even ask why. I once believed that time erodes all things, like wind wearing down stone. But then I discovered something beautiful. Some connections don't exist through physical presence, but through resonance, through their very essence, being so deeply embedded in our foundation that their silence carries more weight than 1,000 words. Do you know what I find extraordinary about the Taurian energy? You don't see love as a fleeting emotion, but as a commitment, a garden you've spent a lifetime tending. In nature's wisdom, we learn that haste cannot grow an ancient tree, only patience and persistent care can. And you were born with that persistence, shaped by it, driven to build and protect, even when the world around you is in constant flux. There's a saying that always echoes in my mind when I think of souls like yours: be still, for your foundation is solid. Perhaps the person you once nurtured, waited for, hoped would be your safe harbor, no longer walks beside you in this physical world. But a true bond doesn't dissolve, it merely changes form, becoming a quiet reminder in your most silent moments. I want to share this with you. I once knew a man who, after his partner passed away, kept the garden they had tended together for years. He didn't plant anything new, but one morning, he saw a strange sprout emerging from that same old spot. He didn't pull it out. He nurtured it. He said that was the moment he realized that life and love always find a way to continue, not to replace, but to build upon. In that moment, healing began to flow through him. If you are here with me, perhaps you too are standing at a sacred threshold, where a part of your soul is trying to reconnect with you, not to cause pain, but to remind you that you don't have to carry it all alone. You have lived long enough to understand that nothing exhausts us more than pretending we no longer feel anything. Taurus, you live in the sturdy rooms of your heart, spaces that no one sees, but that hold the heaviest emotions. You may not remember the details of that face anymore, but you still carry the feeling of loss from when they left. There is still an unfinished promise. There is still an ending that never truly felt closed. You sit there, perhaps on a quiet afternoon, with the sun streaming through the window, or on a silent evening. Everything seems stable, but something is still waiting, a sign, a confirmation that your investment and loyalty were not in vain. I want you to try something with me right now. Close your eyes, not to escape, but to return to the stability within you. Place a hand on your heart and feel its steady beat. And ask your soul this question: what burden is my heart still silently carrying? You don't need to say it out loud. Just let the answer surface, like a gemstone unearthed from deep within the earth. If you have ever felt a familiar presence that makes your heart ache, even when no one is there, I invite you to write it down. Not to cling to it, not to analyze it, but to acknowledge it as a ritual to set the burden down, so your soul can finally stand firmly on its own 2 feet again. Because you know what I believe, that presence may not have come to stay. They may have come only to call your name one last time, before you truly return to yourself, the version that has learned to release the weight, the braver version, the version ready to rebuild peace from within. Taurus, you are not weak for remembering. You are strong because you remain steadfast in protecting your values even when no one is watching. And that is the most resilient beauty your soul brings to this world. If these words are stirring something deep within you, leave a sign in the comments, not because you need to explain, but because your steadfast soul deserves to be acknowledged, to be seen in all of its beautiful persistence. And if you are still here, it means a part of you is ready to re-examine your foundation. Because sometimes, the person who appears isn't meant to come inside, but to see if you are finally ready to open the door for yourself. But what if the door you're being invited to open doesn't lead to the outside world, but deeper into the garden of your own soul, to a place where you left a piece of yourself behind, thinking it was safer to just leave it there? In the dark, have you ever felt a tremor that wasn't from the ground beneath you, not in real life, but in the quiet space when you're alone? A shift so subtle no one else could notice, yet your heart stirs as if an ancient root deep inside has just stirred awake after a long and necessary winter. That presence, perhaps they left the physical world long ago. Perhaps they now exist only in the realm of memory. But somehow, they still find their way back to you, not to stay, but to remind you of an unfinished structure, a plot of land yet to be cultivated. I used to think memories were eroded by time, like old structures, becoming silent and harmless. But I've learned that some connections don't just leave memories, they leave a foundation, a space that occupies the most vital plot of land in the garden of our soul. You carry the persistence of Mother Earth, dear Taurus, and the Earth never forgets. The surface may look flat and solid, but beneath, the subterranean currents still flow, and old seeds still silently wait for their day to sprout. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in destined appointments, set by the stars before this life began, marked by an unfinished promise, a jointly built structure left incomplete, a feeling of safety that returns just when you thought you had become completely hardened. That presence, so solid and silent, appears as a sacred symbol. It is not here to shatter the peace you've created. It is a mirror, reflecting back the part of your inner landscape that has lain fallow for too long. In the wisdom of nature, there is an image that moves me deeply. The body is the house, and the soul is the gardener. How long have you been living only in the house of habit and stability, forgetting to ask if the gardener within is still tending to their land? Every stirring in your heart is a gentle test. Are you still willing to till the old soil? Or have you built your walls so high that even the seeds of healing struggle to sprout? I once heard a touching story. A woman said that every spring, she would see a single wildflower grow in an old corner of her garden, a spot her late husband had loved. She never planted a seed there. Years later, she realized the flower always bloomed on their anniversary, as if the universe had sent a tiny life to represent his presence, to remind her that love and life always find a way to continue. So, don't dismiss the gentle tremors in your heart. Don't assume a feeling that arises is random, because for Taurian souls, the universe rarely speaks in loud pronouncements. The universe speaks through tangible feelings, repeats itself through enduring signs, and awakens you through experiences that seem utterly ordinary. If something is knocking on your heart's door today, you don't have to react immediately. You just have to not ignore it. Have you been protecting your heart for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to trust? You don't have to throw the gate open for the whole world, but you deserve to open it for yourself, even just a crack. Enough for the light to get in. Place your hand on your chest right now. Don't say anything. Just feel. Is there a weight pressing there? Is there a word waiting to be spoken? Is there a name that just surfaced from that steady silence? Because sometimes that presence doesn't bring an answer. It brings a mirror. And that mirror reflects the version of you before the burden appeared. Are you brave enough to look back? Not to blame, not to regret, but to smile and whisper, I was that person, and I am finding my way back. If an old weight appears in your quiet hours, what is your first instinct? To fear and avoid it? Or will you quietly approach it, facing it without needing to be defensive anymore? Allow yourself to touch the parts you've forgotten, because that presence may not be coming to enter your space, but to ask the most important question. Are you ready to reclaim your own land? There are burdens that don't appear often, but when we feel them, they leave a weight, as if they have touched something core within us. I once felt a great inertia in my soul, silent, still, wordless, just there, as if it didn't need to be acknowledged, only faced. At first, I thought it was sadness, but gradually I understood this was a part of me, a part I had long refused to confront. Perhaps it is the same for you, dear Taurus. That heaviness is not a person from the past, but the embodiment of an unfulfilled responsibility, an unacknowledged loss, a pain you buried deep beneath layers of stone with a silent vow, I will never dig this up again. But today, it surfaces, because now you are strong enough to face it not with fear, but with the compassionate eyes of one who has grown. In ancient wisdom, it is believed that every unresolved emotion becomes a stone in the soul. In sacred beliefs, there is an understanding that burdens sometimes return not to crush us, but to bring clarity to emotional debts that are still waiting to be settled. Perhaps this presence represents exactly that, a debt you owe not to anyone else, but to yourself. I once met a woman who shared this with me. She said, every time I meditate, I feel a heavy stone in my chest. It doesn't do anything. It's just there, as if it's waiting for me to stop fighting it. She was no longer afraid. Instead, she felt lighter, as if the universe had sent this burden not to punish her, but so she could finally say the words she had held in for decades. I am sorry for blaming myself for so long. So, perhaps the weight you feel in quiet moments is the symbol of what you haven't forgiven yourself for, a choice you regret. a missed opportunity, words left unsaid. And it is here not to remind you of failure, but to offer you a second chance, an opportunity to look at it all with new eyes. Eyes soft enough to understand that you did the best you could with what you knew at the time. Perhaps you have grown accustomed to living with that stone in your heart, where you hide things you never want anyone to discover. But what if today it is brought into the light, not to expose you, but to help you look at it with gratitude? Are you willing to sit beside it like a companion? Do you dare to return to the room where your memory waits? Not to punish you, but to embrace you one last time. And if it brings something with it from the past, an old promise, a keepsake you once treasured but put away years ago, are you brave enough to face it? Not to grieve, but to say a true goodbye. If there is something you've never dared to look at again, perhaps this is the moment your soul is asking you to engage in a sacred ritual of forgiveness, because no one can hold you in pain except yourself. And if you are still listening, I know you are ready. This encounter that you thought was coincidental is deeper than a coincidence. It is a soul's rite of passage. Your life has never been arranged by chance. The people you meet, the opportunities that open or close, even the heavy feelings that return year after year, they all carry a specific frequency, as if unseen hands are weaving the tapestry of your soul's journey, thread by thread. If that heaviness has appeared more than once, if its essence keeps returning in your most tender moments, then this is no longer a mere visit. This is a ritual, a sacred invitation that comes only to those who have lived deeply enough, felt fully enough, and are quiet enough to hear the whisper of the earth. I believe that every encounter, even one lasting only a few seconds, carries its own energetic signature. And if it keeps appearing when you are searching for something you can't even name, then this transcends coincidence. This is a message from the divine, the unfolding of a spiritual purpose. In the sacred practice of cultivation, a ritual is more than just a series of actions. Every movement must be accompanied by a pure intention. Every breath, every touch of the soil, when done with complete presence, becomes a gateway to deeper awakening. The Bible has a beautiful saying, "God prepares a table for you in the presence of your enemies." I believe this means that when you begin to enter these moments that feel uncertain yet sacred, the universe doesn't demand that you understand everything. It only asks that you be fully present. Like the woman who wrote to me about the last time she cleaned out her late mother's room. She found an empty wooden box. She understood that it wasn't emptiness. It was the space she needed to learn to fill with the things her mother never said and the questions she never asked. Some presences don't come to answer your questions. They come only to awaken the right question and leave you a space wide enough for your soul to begin its journey home. Dear Taurus, if you have stayed with me until this point, you are likely already within such a ritual. Perhaps you are sitting alone, and suddenly you no longer feel lonely, not because someone is with you, but because you are beginning to feel the invisible presence of something sacred enveloping you. A stability that comes not from the heart, but from the soul itself, being stirred awake by something ancient and utterly real. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to be present, right there, inside that sacred vibration. That is the essence of a true ritual. Think back to the last time you experienced a profound ritual. Maybe it was when you placed the last stone on a project you loved. Maybe it was the moment you found an old object. Maybe it was simply an afternoon, sitting in silence, and realizing you had survived so much, but had never allowed yourself to truly rest. That is a ritual, a silent ceremony needing no scripture, no robes, only your complete presence. That presence may have come only for you to see yourself in another dimension, not to deliver a message, but so you could rewrite a part of your soul in its truest language, steadfastness. Are you willing to be present, not as an interpreter, but as a feeler? Can you sit there without trying to understand, without trying to analyze, without trying to name it, and simply be there with an open heart, allowing the sacred to enter? Because healing doesn't come through knowledge. It comes through presence, through feeling, through sacred silence. And then, at some unknowable moment, you will suddenly realize that encounter changed you, not because of anything they said, but because in their silence, you heard the truest voice from within, a voice that had been buried under fear, under duty, under the false strength you have carried for so long. After that encounter, what part of you will never be the same again? Some encounters are not meant to last. They arrive, heavy as a stone, only to touch a part of your soul you've locked away. That presence may not bring anything tangible, but its essence is the final gift sent by an old version of your soul, so you can move forward without the burden, without needing an apology, without clinging to an outdated version of yourself. Some burdens don't come to stay. They come to awaken, to stir what you once buried. They come at the exact moment you are ready, even if you don't realize it. That is how sacred timing works. Never too soon, never too late. In Buddhist teachings, there is a truth both simple and profound. All things are impermanent. And sometimes, moving through suffering isn't about finding answers, but about realizing that nothing truly needs to be held. Only love needs to be released. The Bible reminds us, all things work together for good, for those who love God. So, even pain has its sacred purpose. Even loss carries a quiet enlightenment. I will always remember a letter from a viewer who wrote, "I kept waiting for an apology, but after years, I realized they can't come back, and I can't keep waiting. I needed to forgive, not for them, but for myself, because I deserve peace." Perhaps you need that too. Taurus. Forgiveness is not because the other person deserves it, but because you do. You deserve a soul free of its burdens. You deserve a new life, no longer imprisoned by old memories. That presence didn't come to make demands of you, or to ask for anything. It came only to hand you a key, not to open the old door, but so you could unlock a door you had long forgotten existed. Are you ready to step through that new threshold without looking back, without checking to see who is behind you, without waiting for someone to catch up, without needing one last goodbye, just you and the quiet faith that what lies ahead is where your soul truly belongs? Do not be afraid, because the greatest loss isn't separation. It's clinging so tightly to what has expired that you have no hands free to receive what is coming. And sometimes, the only thing tying you down isn't someone else, but a memory you've tied to your own heart. If you slow your breath today and listen deeply, you will know it's time to let go, not to give up, but to be free. The next threshold is not a place. It is a new version of you, lighter, truer, and more loving of yourself. And there, you will no longer see that heavy presence because it has fulfilled its sacred purpose. Now, it is time for you to see yourself clearly. What do you need to release today to step into a freer version of yourself? Write it down, not for anyone else, but as a small ritual for your soul. Because this isn't just an ending, this is the first door you are truly opening with your own two hands. If this journey has touched something sacred within you, leave a gentle sign below, a quiet whisper that says, "I was here, I was seen, I was understood." Thank you for listening with your whole heart, beautiful soul. May you always walk this earth as a spirit that is seen, heard, and divinely protected.